Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the bottles of water that we filtered for you. I know that we're gonna charge you $5. That's something that used to be free, but you're gonna drink it anyway.
And kill the planet.
G'day, wherever you're listening from, at whatever time of day you're listening in. This is the Elaborators. You're with Pastor Justin here from WBC, and this is episode 7 of the Elaborators. We've been elaborating on all sorts of things, but mainly around this idea of what it is to find peace. And we've talked about what it is to deal with anxiety, what it is to deal with burnout, what it is to find rest, and of course, Pastor Ina K is very famous. Just don't worry about it. Just don't worry, be happy. You can go and find that one as well. But today, on the pod, on the Elaborators pod, very special guest, Pastor Deanna, will be with us. She spoke to us, and you can check out the message on the WBC YouTubes and all the rest. She spoke to us about what it would be to cry, essentially. And, so in preparation for this episode, I just sat in the corner and cried for quite some time. So I feel like I'm quite qualified to introduce you to a very special guest today, Pastor Deanna.
Hey.
How you doing?
I don't deserve that intro.
Really? I think so. I think you do. And the main reason you do is because, of course, you and I have both been practicing. Have you been sitting in the corner and crying as well?
Oh, yeah. I have my tissue right here. Always have one.
Are you discovering my defense mechanism on crying is just to try and make people laugh?
Yeah. That's very common.
Do you know what I learned actually was that when I was doing singing lessons, and I never did a lot. To all my professional singing friends, I do apologise. I never did a lot. But if you want to sing well, if you want to open up your lungs, your singing teacher will tell you to either laugh the word or cry the word.
I think I'd rather laugh the word.
Yeah.
I think I would, yeah.
Make them laugh, make them laugh, make them laugh. Donald O'Connor singing in the rain.
Yeah.
You'd know that reference, wouldn't you?
I don't think I do know this reference, but my mind is going other places. I made myself laugh really good this week. I was on the treadmill, and I looked, and over across the room, the kids' table, right? The Little E's table was right under the dartboard. And I thought, how funny is that?
I'm sorry.
We raised them tough.
Sorry. At this point, Deanna's point as a grandmother was that she looked over at her grandchildren and there was a dartboard above them. And how did that make you feel?
I just thought it was funny.
I
got twisted humor. I'm sorry.
Not sure if I should dig any further on that. Now, just by way of context, just fill us in on a little bit of give us the Deanna letters that go beside your name or whatever it is, because we have talked to you before, I think, about some of the member care process and research that you've done, but just give us a sense of why or what it is that gives you the confidence to speak to this subject of grief.
Well, we've been in full-time ministry in a church setting for, I don't know, close to 30 years. Gosh, it makes me sound old. I am old, but that's okay. And I'm sad about that. But
you're sad about being old? Here, have a chocolate.
Oh, no.
Don't eat it whilst on air, though, because it won't work for you. Being in ministry, we dealt with a lot of people who are struggling in a variety of ways. Yeah. So I did counseling and training. So I have it's complicated, but counseling certificate that does a pastoral counseling on top of theology that I'd had in the past. If I can catch that thought, essentially where your life took you, you then skilled up for what was happening anyway.
Pretty much. Good catch, Justin. That's good. But then I did a master's degree in what's known as member care, and it's a terrible name because nobody understands what that is. But basically, it's pastoral care or holistic care of cross-cultural workers. So it's very specialized in counseling for people who... Did
that field exist previously, or is this a very new field of research? It doesn't. It certainly doesn't feel like a thing that I've heard. I mean, I've heard from you about it, but I've not ever heard it really outside of meeting you and learning about your background. But is it a relatively new area of study? Research, I should say.
You have to ask these complicated questions, don't you? Technically, yes and no, because it was. It started,
yes and no. Best answer to any question ever.
Well, it started in the field of medicine and psychiatry, dealing with really broken cross-cultural workers returning. And this would have been many years ago, like 40s, 50s, right?
So in simple terms, we would have just used to say, that's culture shock. And Is that
a little more complex than that? We're talking about like human brokenness more than culture shock. Culture shock is transient, but
I'm saying broadly speaking, that would have what it was at the extreme end of that, and it was a new part of research in the 40s and 50s. Yeah,
it was something they were seeing a pattern of brokenness in cross-cultural workers who would either leave the field early or they would come home and just not be well.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it morphed into a lot of research and a lot of projects through the years, and a lot of early pioneers did a lot of writing in that. Most of them were mental health practitioners, like psychiatrists, psychologists, that sort of thing. And then the looked at preventative care and how to send and support better and stuff like that. So in the end, a lot of what I have done has been preventative care practice and looking into research options about how we do better in certain specific areas. Like mine was disability, because nobody else had done any work in that area.
Right.
So I was trying. So that's what a lot of the research has been.
So you're talking about in this context, you're talking about the worker who has a disability that's going out. Where's the disability part come into it?
I was looking, when I started, I was looking at more families that had children with a diagnosis of a developmental disability, mainly autism spectrum. But that was just because I didn't have any information. I was dealing with a lot of families that had done that. So one of the things that came out with that was grief, actually, which surprised me. It's like, I didn't think of that. But yeah, there's that sense of grief. Because I was looking for ways to help these families navigate the system better.
Did you feel that through your research you were actually able to help?
Yes. Yeah. Because it exploded, and I ended up not co-authoring, but contributing in a book for disability admission, which had very little to do with my research, but because of my position.
But that was where the branches went?
And I had so many contacts from around the world, people saying, we're so thankful this, can we get a copy and stuff. So then I did publish it just recently, this year, actually.
Oh, yes?
Yeah. I don't have it with me.
How do we find that? Is it online somewhere?
It's on Amazon.
Is there a digital book version of it?
I think there is.
What's it called?
I don't know. It's called Disability Inclusive Member Care. So
Disability Inclusive Member Care.
Yeah. But it's very niche.
Featuring our famous guest who gets another round of applause.
Yeah. But
that's enough of that.
But yeah, so it's just an emerging, that particular topic's an emerging topic, but a lot of the member care research that's being done, there's two universities, one's in the U.S. and one's in the U.K. That actually give this degree at this level. So usually the people that practition are like a counselor, like Chad Loftus.
Yes, Chad Loftus, who's one of the missionaries that we support through WBC, yes.
He's a mission counselor. So he works at a mission counseling center, which often people get pulled off of. We're talking a lot about mission.
Oh, yeah.
Pulled off of fields and sent there
Yeah.
so they can see people like Chad and stuff like that. And that's all part of the member care practice. So it's becoming more wide and varied and looks a lot different these days than it used to.
So obviously that's I mean, we've dug pretty deep into where you started and why you did the research, and I'm really thankful to hear that, hey, you actually feel like it's made a difference, because I think that's the biggest thing. When you've done the research, you want it to actually have, not all research lands with an answer, does it?
True.
So that's pretty exciting, and you've been able to contribute to a culture that's growing and supporting people. Now, on the weekend, you got up on the pulpit at WBC and brought out this key scripture from John 11, where the shortest scripture, the shortest verse in the Bible, which many people would know the two words, which is
Jesus wept.
Jesus wept.
Yeah.
Of course, Jesus wept over his friend Lazarus. And there's
Did he?
Well, hang on. Can I give a D answer?
Sure.
Yes and no.
That is an answer that I would give. I'm non-committal, you know.
Yeah. No, we've hung out a lot. We've hung out enough. But what I'm saying is that it's in the context of learning that his friend has died. Now, we know that the other side of that story is one of joy. We know that the other side of that story is one of miraculous. And of course, Jesus' life teaches us all sorts of lessons, including how he worked with the family and how he worked with the culture at the time, dealing with grief. And as the narrative goes, he actually tells the people to stop weeping over Lazarus. So it is a very complex narrative, but the Jesus wept verse jumped out at you simply because it said Jesus had emotions and let them out.
Yeah, and I think that's what we were trying to go for, was to I think when we first started talking about the series and the different things, I said we have to put grief in there because it impacts so many different areas, and a lot of these other emotions that we feel, anxiety, depression, burnout, those kind of things can actually have an foundational layer of grief that's never been dealt with. So I wanted to normalize the emotion of that, I suppose. So I thought, well, that sums it up very simply. Jesus wept, and it just revealed his humanity and the fact that if he can do it, and he was a man's man, if you will. Depends on who you ask.
Yes and no.
But that it's okay to cry, and we don't see that a lot in some of our cultures, I think.
So there's this moment where the humanity, we know the divinity, but the humanity, that feels like a human thing, but we also know that that's one of the attributes of God, that he sings over his people and he weeps and he grieves for his people as well.
Exactly.
So the scripture describes that throughout the person of God as well, which again, if we're made in his image, if we feel the feels, then we need to be able to admit that we feel the feels and let them out. But one of the things you touched on very strongly was this idea that grief is not just about death.
That's true.
So tell us about this sense of, I think the way you put it was, it's about anything that is lost.
And I think that started coming. You're going to get the mission answer from me a lot of times, just because, well, that's where a lot of this stuff developed for me.
You be you, as they say in the hipsters. You do you, girl.
Well,
I sounded old then. Anyway,
I did. I volunteered for this committee to do reentry with cross-cultural workers. So cross-cultural workers come back. They have this retreat for them. It's a umbrella organization here in Australia. It meets in Sydney and it meets in Melbourne, retreat does.
Just briefly, we didn't actually say, a cross-cultural worker is someone who has started in one nation and gone and served in another nation with another language. Is there a specific around that we should understand, or is that the basics?
I mean, the old school word would be missionary.
Oh, okay.
We don't like to say that anymore because it has very negative connotations.
Sure. Okay, cool.
So with these workers that came back, they go through this process. It's reverse culture shock, basically, which a lot of people don't expect. We tell them about it before they go overseas, and they're like, la, 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 we're just so excited to go overseas. we don't remember any of this. And then they come back, and
they're not doing the la, la, la anymore.
The bottom drops out because they don't understand it. So, and looking at all of that, the reentry stuff is really what got me thinking about different losses and stuff as well, because they're processing a loss of identity and a loss of their job security and finance. Everything just hits the fan. It's really pretty significant. And so then, when you bring that down to just normal life stuff, anytime we go through a transition, what's known as a transition, it looks like a valley. Okay?
Yep.
I mean, psychologically, if you look at the psychological studies, it's a dip in a valley. It actually mirrors the grief curve, because transitions, when you have an ending, you go through a process. It's a valley, and you get to a new beginning, and that's restabilize, and you restabilize, right? And so that's what happens in grief. This is what happens in transition. And so any transition that you go through creates grief. And so some of it's really short and quick.
Yep.
You got a new job or whatever. And it does this thing also, it mimics this other thing, the stress curve as well, which is a transition curve, but it creates stress for us. So physical stress. But at the basis of it all is grief. So, because it's something lost and has to be rediscovered and
this would be in our day-to-day structures. This might mean something where I know that for our children now, there's more and more moments in school that are celebrated and marked. And I know some of us go, why are they doing that? But my understanding is they're doing that to help the child understand they're moving on to the next pattern in school, the next type of, the approach of education. We were talking the other day about our kids go from kinder, where they have one teacher to every 3 children, to going to foundation, where they have one teacher to every 30 sort of thing.
And they have to share.
And they just have to share. And so life kind of has these moments of transition, and we're dealing with, and so that's a sort of a simple version, I guess, of what a loss might look like. You've got a couple of tools in front of you that you help people with. For all of those listening, we'll try and describe these as best we can. For all those watching, you'll be able to see them. But you did say to me before, or where do you want to start, actually?
Well, no, I mean, I was waiting to hear what you're going to say.
Well, I was going to ask about the bear cards, but let's talk about Tear Soup. You've got a book called Tear Soup.
I do. I
remember a book called Wombat Stew. Is that similar?
No. Actually, this was written by a group of people. And okay, so going back to member care, there's a guy that's well known globally. He's written a bunch of books, done a lot of research and stuff like that. And this was on his top 100 list. And I was curious, so I bought a copy. And I have bought so many copies since then, and it's a little pricey, but I've passed it out.
This is the one that you give to people to help?
Yeah, and it's a palliative care nurse that she, for over 30 30 years, she walked alongside people who were dying.
Wow.
And so she, in collaboration, wrote this book. And one of the things you'll notice, I want to show you this picture, Justin.
Yep, I'm going to hold it up for the camera. I'll look at it first so that I know what it is. But there it is for the camera, and it just describe it to us.
And those books on the shelf, if you notice, each one has a different title, from, profound loss of a child or loss of a spouse, to things like failing a biology test, okay?
Right.
So anytime we have a failure or loss or a dashed expectation, if you will, it creates different sizes of grief. You see different sizes of pots there that people cook their soup in, their grief soup in. But this is... one of the things that it also talks about is that how people process grief differently. So you've got somebody experiencing the same grief, whatever it is. They experience that differently because of different personality types and different ways of coping and things like that.
So just to describe the image, on the kitchen bench, there are many different sizes of pots. The smallest one is not fair. Then the largest one is more than I can bear. And it moves through not fair to bad news, big disappointment, to serious heartache, to profound loss, to major tragedy, to more than I can bear. Yeah. And more than I can bear, I presume, is just a combination of all of the things.
Maybe not having the psychological resources or the supportive resources around you so that you're very, you don't have the tools that you need to get through something that's a profound loss.
On the weekend, you interviewed Margaret Young, and one of the reasons you did that was because she's an artist and she processed her grief through very descriptive pictures. And so again, one of the things we can speak to is that images often help bring words out that we can't say.
Yeah.
So you've also got some other image-based tools there. What are the bear cards? You said to me, "Can I bring the bear cards?" I was like, I don't know. Is that something from the zoo? What's happening there?
No, actually, it's something, and they've updated them since I bought mine many
years
years
is there
ago.
More bears? They've found more bears?
I don't know.
They've discovered more species?
I don't have the new ones. I don't know what's changed about, but basically it's when people don't have, especially, they work really great with kids, which is why I first bought them, but they have a lot of different bears. I only picked out the negative ones, but you can see there's different range. You're welcome to look at them.
Okay, so I'm now picking up a
Yours
set
would all be yellow, I think.
set of large cards that all have pictures of fuzzy little bears in different poses, covering their eyes or jumping and shouting or looking curious or angry or whatever. But these are obviously, this is going to help me describe a mood. Is that right? So if I can sort of hold some of those up for the camera if you're watching this on the vodcast. If you're not, I'll just tell you they're cute little bears. But yeah, how do these help, or how do you use these in a counseling scenario?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that you could use them, but what I like to do is have someone look through them and find one that describes how they're feeling.
Yep.
And then they can talk about it, because what it does is it projects their feelings onto the bear. And so what is that bear feeling? What would you say if I said, Justin, what is this bear feeling?
That looks like a tantrum, the one you're holding up.
It does too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm used to that one in my house.
Yeah, and so, or like that one, how's that one different?
Oh, he's sad and upset and needs a cuddle.
Yeah. So it just helps people.
I got a gold star. Can I have a gold star now? I respond well to treats.
How about this one?
Oh, is that the shame bear?
Well, it could be shame.
A hiding bear?
Or it could be just closed off because they can't handle what's going on and don't want to interact with people. That's kind of how I was feeling this morning. Did you know that?
Yeah, I got a vibe. I didn't even have bear cards to understand that. I just had to go with the vibe. So, but what we're saying is, if grief is a sense of loss, there's a curve to it. It's a transition moment. Basically, and we've talked to a couple of psychologists over this series, and really one of the learnings is, as long as it takes you to get into that space, is as long as it'll take you to get out. These are not quick solutions, and I'm assuming that there's variations on that. But that theme does seem to come through. So how do you help people not only start to do the work, but continue to do the work? And maybe you could speak from your own personal experience there too. Because sometimes it's hard enough to get over the line of, I want to talk about this, I want to try and process it. But then it's like going to see the doctor until the thing is done is kind of the process.
It's interesting because I've had a lot of conversations this week. One, because of the sermon, but yeah, well, that's probably where a lot of them came from.
Yeah.
So, but some not. Some were different from that. But I was talking to somebody that said it was just they don't even realize what it is that they're feeling. Okay? So that's it begins a conversation or whatever. But somebody came up to me and they said, "Well, I'm different. I don't experience grief like this. I just quoted the 23rd Psalms, and I was able to get on with it. And this person had suffered profound losses in her life.
Could be. Is that like as a meditative process she was using the 23rd Psalm? Or?
It could be, and we're all different, and we've all have different capacities and stuff like that. But it's interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about this. You know, we talked about Margaret processing through painting or imagery, right? I was talking to somebody else after the sermon on Sunday, and they'd gone to the Nick Cave concert. It was at Hanging Rock. You like Nick Cave?
Love Nick Cave, but also know that he has a tragic story. Yes,
exactly.
Very and recently tragic. Yeah.
So his son had fallen off a cliff and was killed in 2015, and this whole last album, his most recent album, was I think most of the songs that he did at his concert were about the album that he had written about this death and how he processed it through music. So we see people processing through art. We see people processing through music. It's just that the reason for that is it uses a different part of the brain. So people that are more creative can find that creative outlet. It uses a different part of their brain that helps them process those emotions. A lot of art therapy would be an example of somebody doing that.
But I think one of the things that I pick up on in this, because we start on a Sunday often, and we talk about this idea that we sing songs about chains breaking and victory, and I've often said to people, as a worship leader myself, sometimes there are Sundays where I cannot sing those songs and possibly should not sing those songs because that's not what I'm understanding about where I'm up to with God. So I think part of you said it before, being honest with ourselves, some of these moments help us just process. You've got a thing there called the emotional first aid kit, which is another card-based thing, a values card, and these are things that you would use in a one-on-one counseling type scenario. Is that the main spaces you use those?
Yeah, well, I mean, I collect resources. That's kind of my thing. I collect all kinds of resources because you never know when they're going to come in handy. So you wouldn't have to use these with a counselor, but like the values cards, a lot of times we feel grief when our values have been assaulted, if you will, or challenged or whatever. In fact, when we did the Safe Church training recently, we had people up at the front in tears over it because they felt their values were being assaulted a little bit as we were trying to incorporate new legislation and stuff like that. But a lot of people have never taken the time or made the effort to identify what their values are.
Right.
And so they don't know that's like, so if you can help them, strengthen them, and equip them with what they're,
You give me half the pack and I'll pick one of yours. Here we go. Here's the pack. So we were going through, and I'm going to do this like I've seen on Penn and Teller. I'll do this like I've seen on Penn and Teller. Just pick
a card, any card.
Any card. Is this your card?
Let's see.
Here we go.
No, that's the directions. But that's probably
that's your card. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have just that's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, here.
Anybody that knows anything about Pastor Deanna will understand that she wants to know what the instructions are and what the rules are there. Are you?
It's too funny. Ironic.
Are you the person that plays Monopoly and says, no, that's not how free parking works?
I don't know. I don't play Monopoly. It's too tedious for me. But integrity. That's a really value for me. So
there's structure. Is that a strong one for you?
Probably not.
Probably not?
I need space to be...
sorry, Simon, producer, is off camera right now, but he's putting his hand up for that one. Do you know, to Simon, the producer, I love you, mate, and I'm sorry that I don't have that one. I try really hard, and he loves me anyway.
But if there was like one...
Because we have this one. It's called Trust. There we go.
There you go.
Well, at least I had it yesterday. I'll check again today.
Well, I think my first would be, home is probably one, but my faith is certainly a value for me. So anything that I feel that learning is certainly a value. I found a learning card, but there's a lot of different ones.
Challenge is another one there.
I like to challenge.
Yes, I was going to say. I know.
Family
is a huge one there. Freedom, that's a big one for
an American.
I was going to say not for Victorians. No. Anyway, moving along. But there's so much to do, and again, one of the things we talked about was if grief itself is not just about death, that's the first very big point. If we know that we can't always verbalize our grief because not only does somebody else not understand it, but often we don't understand it.
Right.
And that's why we're using these tools. And if grief is quite simply a valley and there is an uphill, but there's also a mountaintop, or there's a balance point at the other side of that. If anyone's feeling just through this conversation right now that you're having some aha moments, what's our next? What do we do?
Well, I mean, what an aha moment would be is if you're not feeling yourself, I think. Okay, so that's number one. If you're not able to cope and function normally and not feeling yourself, you need some help. Because at the bottom of that curve is what's called the neutral zone, and people can get stuck there, and that's often when they need help. It depends on... Something that's worth saying is that the deeper or more profound the grief, the bigger the issue, the longer it's going to take to get through, and probably the more help that's going to need to go through that. Whereas if it's a little thing, it's maybe not so much. But I brought some chocolate, and the reason I brought chocolate is because often food is a coping mechanism.
I don't use food as a coping mechanism at all. Thank you. Thank you to. I've got a special food product in my fridge. Do you know what it's called?
No.
It's called midnight bacon.
Oh, is it already cooked?
No. The process of cooking is the. I've got to stop. I don't know. It's available at all supermarkets. Midnight bacon. It's amazing.
Is it literally called midnight bacon?
No, it's not.
Oh. I'm gullible. Okay, I confess.
But thank you anyway. I do appreciate that. Yeah.
No, but food or alcohol are some very common ones. Shopping. I find myself I shop more when I'm feeling a little sad. It's like but it's online shopping, which has made it really easy, so we can overspend and things like that, or we'll shut ourselves off. Those are other warning signs, red flags, that we might need a little bit more help. So yeah.
And so hopefully through the series, and again, we'd encourage you to go back through the series of Elaborating Podcast, because there are a number of great guests that we've had. But feel free to get in touch with us here at WBC if you'd like some reference, some people to be referred to, or if you just even like to speak to one of us. Sometimes we're helpful too. But sometimes, of course, we do. Sometimes we do what we love. Sometimes we do what we need to do. And sometimes I think when I look at your story and how it all began, the tools that you've built up are because of the places God's put you. And so we're really thankful for the message that you brought on the weekend, and certainly thankful for the skill and the wisdom that you brought to that. And I'm just taken with the bears. I think I'm going to get myself a packet of bears.
As long as you know how to use them, right? That's the instruction card there.
If you need a packet of bears, Pastor Dee will be with you. Folks, thanks for joining us on the Elaborators. Obviously, there's so much more we could say, but please give a round of applause to Pastor Deanna for coming in and subjecting herself to whatever that was.
Yeah.
We even bought colouring in pencils. We didn't even use them. I'm going to finish the podcast by just colouring in my circle. I'm going to colour in.
You're not supposed to colour it in. You're supposed to say how you're feeling today.
Oh, my goodness. Are you giving me more instructions? I want to colour in the circle. Why can't I just colour in the circle? I like colouring in the circle.
How am I feeling today?
I don't know. Shocked.
That you're doing it wrong.
I'm doing it wrong. You're doing the cathartic process wrong.
And you know what? That's a good one. There's no right or wrong in that.
God bless you all. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Bye.